It was during my visits to the alley behind the old bakery in Branswick that I encountered an unexpected duo. On my first day there, the quiet surroundings were filled only with the soft sound of rustling leaves and the occasional clink of metal from nearby bins. As I peered around a stack of crates, my eyes landed on a thin, weathered tabby cat. She watched over a small kitten that stumbled awkwardly between shadows. The mother cat looked tired but resolute, as if she had devoted all her energy to caring for that little one. The next day, I returned with a can of wet food and a folded blanket tucked into my satchel. The back lot of the bakery smelled of flour dust, and I felt a mix of hope and uncertainty as I approached the spot where I had first seen them. To my relief, Mara, as I had started to call her, was right there in the same position, with her tail curled around her body and her eyes fixed on me. The kitten, whom I named Lint for his tendency to gather bits of fluff, was trying to navigate a crooked wooden ladder, its paws far too large for its small frame. Sitting cross-legged a few feet away, I opened the can slowly. The noise made Mara flinch, a subtle reminder that she was cautious. I placed the food on the ground and stayed still, carefully observing her. Minutes passed before Lint's curious nose twitched, urging him toward the tempting smell. I watched as he tentatively approached the food, mewing with the high-pitched sounds typical of very young animals. Mara didn't stop him, but she also didn't follow. Her gaze remained fixed on me, a steady presence that made me uneasy. Each time I returned over the following days, I brought more food in the blanket, hoping to coax Mara closer. Lint, however, began to embrace the opportunities I provided. He ate, played, and even curled up in my lap one afternoon, which filled me with a sense of possibility. Yet, despite the bond that was forming with Lint, Mara remained distant. She observed us from her safe spot under a rusted scaffold, always just beyond my reach. While Lint thrived, full of energy and mischief, celebrating his small discoveries, Mara never touched the food I left for her. A few times I returned to empty plates and paw prints in the dirt, leaving me to wonder about the invisible barriers holding her back. By the end of that first week, Lint was a bundle of joy. He darted out to greet me at the sound of my voice, his purring so enthusiastic it turned into hiccups. In contrast, Mara stood as a protective sentinel, her silence and watchfulness creating an invisible wall between us. It left me pondering, what must she have endured to maintain such a distance? It started with a puzzling morning when I discovered a small spot of blood on the wooden pallet where Mara usually rested. The unease settled in as I recognized that something might be wrong. With Lint nowhere around, I crouched down, searching the alley as if I were piecing together a mystery. My heart raced as I whispered their names. Minutes felt like hours until Lint finally appeared, limping and with a fresh scratch down his side. I quickly scooped him up, holding him close to my chest. His little body trembled, but he stayed silent, clinging to me for comfort. Yet, the absence of Mara weighed heavily on my mind. After settling Lint and making sure he had food and water, I took him to the vet. Thankfully, he didn't need stitches. A cleaning and some antibiotics were all that was required. The vet mentioned it might be a territorial swipe, possibly from another stray or even Mara herself. The thought of a mother hurting her own kitten disturbed me, yet I couldn't ignore the possibility. Had Lint gotten too close and drawn her ire? To get a second opinion, I invited my friend Claire over. With her experience in working with feral cats, I hoped she'd provide insight. But as soon as Claire moved closer, Mara darted up the scaffold, staring down at us as if we had disrupted something sacred. Lint froze mid-paw swipe, clearly concerned about her presence. Claire, reading the tension, said, "She's not going to come around, not like he will." I wondered aloud if we should consider trapping her, but even as the words left my mouth, I regretted them. Claire shrugged, posing a tough question. "Are you rescuing both, or just the one who wants to be rescued?" The weight of her inquiry struck me hard. I hadn't looked at it that way before, and now I was left questioning my intentions. Later that night, I returned to the alley with Lint wrapped gently in a towel. He chirped softly upon seeing our familiar surroundings, and as I placed him down, Mara emerged from the shadows. Her movements were slow and deliberate, but when she hissed at him, low and sharp, she quickly vanished again into the shelter of the scaffold. In that moment, a realization dawned on me. It was possible she didn't want him back. The thought made it difficult to sleep that night. As I lay awake, listening to the clock ticking and Lint shifting in his dreams, I pondered the fracture that seemed to be forming in their relationship. What did it mean for both of them moving forward? The rain fell heavily that week, drenching everything in its path. I stood beneath my umbrella, looking at the makeshift shelter I had tried to create for Mara. A cracked plastic crate turned sideways, a towel draped over it, held down by a brick. I had meant for it to be a brief gesture, a way to show that she was still remembered. But now, with the storm raging, the shelter sagged under the water's weight. One corner of the towel flapped in the wind, almost like a surrender. Each evening, I found myself returning to the alley, and there she was, Mara, always under the scaffold. Her gaze was piercing, her body poised and still. She didn't eat, didn't flinch, didn't come closer. It was as if she was watching the life she once had slip away, resigned to the distance between us, like a spectator behind a glass. I called her name softly, though I knew she had never responded to it. A moment later, I caught a glimpse of her eyes peering from beneath the gap. She was dry and hidden, still alone. Back at home, Lint had settled in as if he had been waiting for this new life. He curled up in my arms, squeaked when I left, and chirped at my return. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unresolved with Mara. I had thought she had given him up, and when I shared this thought with Claire, she remained quiet for a while before gently suggesting, "Or maybe she thinks you already took him." That truth hung heavy in the air between us, palpable yet unspoken. Every time I closed my eyes, I would see Mara again, moving in that strange, weightless manner, not out of curiosity, but something colder and older. She had looked right through me, and in that moment, I understood something I wasn't ready to confront. The hiss I'd heard wasn't fear, it was finality. It was her way of saying, "This one is yours now." Morning light filtered through the window, but even its warmth couldn't ease the ache in my chest. I wrapped Lint in a towel and carried him down to the bakery steps, hoping the fresh air might clear my mind. As he snuggled closer, blinking at the morning sounds, I felt a mix of comfort and sorrow, knowing that something had shifted. The space where Mara used to be felt heavier now, filled with the remnants of what was and what could never be again. The evening air felt different as I lingered in the alley. Something intangible shifted around me, making the silence feel denser. For the second night in a row, the food I left untouched sat unbothered, and the damp towel inside the crate remained almost pristine. It was unsettling. The smell, too, had morphed, less of cat and more akin to mildew, a reminder that presence can fade. On the 8th day, I found myself waiting longer than usual. The street lamps buzzed to life, illuminating the puddles of concrete with soft halos of light. The bakery sat closed, and the alley stood empty. "Mara," I called out, my voice echoing against the brick walls. I didn't expect a response, but I couldn't shake the thought of her disappearing without a trace. Earlier that week, Mr. Halvers had approached me as I knelt in the alley, drenched and weary. He looked at me with a mix of concern and weariness. "You can't keep feeding them here," he instructed gently but firmly. "One cat becomes 5, then 10. Customers complain, you understand." Inside, I was torn. Part of me wanted to argue, to explain that this wasn't how it was. But I knew how it looked on the outside, a soaked figure talking to a shadow that wouldn't come when called. Later that night, Lint curled up beside me as I sat on the floor of my dimly lit room. The flickering glow from the street lamp cast long shadows. I felt the warmth of his paw resting on my wrist, the gentle rise and fall of his breathing soothing me, even as I worried about Mara. Did he remember her? Had he started to forget while I was still holding on to every moment? That idea wrestled inside me, twisting something deep. Part of me wanted to return to that alley with a trap, to bring Mara in and make her safe, even if it meant she would loathe every moment of it. Yet another voice, quieter yet sharper, nudged me to consider. Maybe she didn't want saving. Maybe she simply needed space. There I was, caught at a crossroads without a clear path. Was I helping her by staying close? Or was I, in fact, hurting her by refusing to let go? Lint's soft purr filled the quiet, a soothing reminder that I needed to be present for him, even amidst my own inner turmoil. My heart felt torn between two lives that would never merge again, each choice weighing heavily as I settled into the night. It was a Tuesday when Claire's call came through. Days had merged into a blur, and the silence of the alley felt more pronounced without her presence. I hadn't seen Claire in days, and her absence lingered in the air, heavy and uninviting. The alley was unchanged, quiet and still, like a stage left barren after the actors had exited. I found myself returning with a sense of longing, sometimes with lint zipped snugly inside my coat, sometimes alone. Each visit deepened the vacancy she left behind. It was as if the very walls held echoes of her. High on the alley wall, I once spotted a faint, smudged paw print, barely discernible but unmistakable. It told me she had climbed, reaching heights I'd never seen her explore before. There was something unsettling yet profound about that small mark. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just absence I was experiencing. It was a deliberate choice she'd made. It felt intentional. Lint meowed softly from within my coat, shifting comfortably against me. Meanwhile, my heart ached with a hollow thrum, a premonition that she may not return. It wasn't panic that stirred within me. It was the weight of acceptance, heavy yet strangely liberating. In contrast, Lint thrived in this quieter world. He chased bottle caps across the living room floor, appearing innocent to the complexities of what was lost. Scaling the couch like it was a mountain, he was oblivious to the shadows that stretched where she should have been. At night, he curled against my chest, purring with a contentment that was infectious, yet a quiet guilt woven itself through my moments of joy. I found myself pondering what Lint might be forgetting. Would he miss the feel of her fur or the sound of her gentle calls? Did he know about the warmth she brought when the nights turned cold? I questioned whether remembering would only bring him pain. Maybe forgetting was, in some way, a kindness. My love for Lint evolved as I saw him grow, even as I mourned the connection he once shared with her. In a complicated twist of emotion, I began to appreciate Claire's choice to leave. She had demonstrated a wisdom that seemed to elude both of us, understanding that sometimes stepping away is the hardest but most necessary decision. And here I was, still searching, still hoping, yet learning to embrace the silence and the memories. Each visit to the alley was a quiet reflection of what had been and what could yet be. The week turned brittle, with thin clouds stretching like fragile threads across a gray sky. The scent of late autumn lingered in the air, whispering change long before the trees could catch up. I found myself standing one last time in the alley, where the empty crate lay tipped over, possibly disturbed by the wind or a raccoon. Instead of fixing it, I chose to stand still, letting the cold seep into my sleeves, as if somehow freezing in place could delay the inevitable. Later that evening, I returned home to find Lint waiting for me as he always did. His head tilted, paws softly patting on the floor, he greeted me with a tiny chirp that warmed me instantly. I scooped him up and buried my face in his fur, and he purred without hesitation. It was a sound born of trust, and in that moment, I realized how much I envied that kind of love, uncomplicated and without history. As I cleaned his food bowl that night, my thoughts drifted back to Claire's earlier call. Her voice had been calm yet careful when she asked if I had made a decision about Lint. Deep down, I knew I hadn't. I responded that there was no need to decide, as he was safe and growing, a part of my life now. Yet, her silence lingered too long before she mentioned the shelter and the spot they were holding for him, but only for a little while longer. My heart raced when I hung up. I felt anger surge not towards Claire, but at the pressure of needing to define something that felt so simple until then. In my peaceful coexistence with Lint, everything had just been. That night, as he curled against my chest, I opened my laptop to write an email to the shelter. I didn't send it. Instead, I let the words sit, waiting for clarity that I was starting to suspect would never arrive. Outside, the alley remained quiet and empty, a lingering reminder of decisions left unmade. Then Claire came by. Standing in my kitchen with a stack of blankets under her arm, she had the look of someone carefully treading on delicate ground. "I can take him," she said gently, "if you need time or space." In that moment, the weight of the conversation hung heavy in the air. Did I really have the right to hold him here, to keep him from whatever was next? The moment I stood up, the decision loomed over me, compelling me to act. I walked into the kitchen, phone in hand, and paused. I could hardly breathe, caught between two futures that felt like they were intertwined yet distinct. I didn't dial, allowing the weight of my choice to settle in the silence. Lint lay curled against my side as I drifted through sleepless hours, chasing fragments of dreams in which nothing made sense. There were corridors without exits and unsettling echoes. I awoke before dawn, the world outside cloaked in a muted blue. He twitched softly, a small solid weight, reminding me of the alley where he had once been fragile and vulnerable. Then I faced the reality that I couldn't keep him just because of guilt, or let him go solely out of fear. Each decision carried its own burden. Letting Lint go meant accepting an endless cycle of wondering, what if? While keeping him meant carrying a piece of Mara's memory that would always bear a weight of unspoken forgiveness. As I reflected on Mara, I considered her calm acceptance. She never fought or pleaded, she simply watched as her kitten stepped into a new life. Perhaps she had understood a truth I had yet to grasp, that while we didn't belong to each other, Lint and I might have a connection worth holding on to. There was a cost to every choice. It was clear that this wasn't about what I wanted, but rather about what I could truly live with. The shelter I eventually chose to visit sat at the town's edge, hidden behind an old warehouse. I couldn't recall the drive there, but I felt the quiet weight in the car. Lint shifted restlessly in his crate at first, then sensed the change surrounding him and fell still. It wasn't danger he sensed, but the unfamiliarity of what lay ahead. And so I stepped into the unknown, grappling with my newfound clarity. It was time to move forward, even if I wasn't entirely sure where that would lead us. Weeks had gone by, and the house felt emptier than I ever remembered. The crate was gone, and the toys were tucked away in a cardboard box that had remained untouched. Some mornings, I would instinctively reach out to the corner of the bed, half expecting to feel the weight of a small sleeping body. But all that greeted me was the echo of routines built around something that was no longer there. I still find myself wandering to the alley from time to time. I treat it like a habit, a flicker of hope lingering in the back of my mind. Despite my searches, there's no sign of Mara, not a flicker of striped fur slipping through shadows. Yet I know she's out there. She never relied on my gaze to exist. Mara belonged to those in-between spaces, like the ledge between windows, the silence between footfalls, and the quiet moments when choices are made without applause or recognition. The memory of that day is still vivid, like a scene I can't shake off. When I first walked into the shelter, the woman behind the counter offered a soft smile, one that suggested she understood heartbreak all too well. It wasn't the bright smile of hope, nor was it filled with words of encouragement. It was a knowing expression that spoke volumes. I remember the trembling in my hands as I handed her the paperwork. Lint, my little companion, was in a crate nearby, his wide eyes and stillness a stark contrast to the chaos in my heart. Kneeling down beside him, I unlocked the door and let my fingers brush the top of his head. He didn't pull away, he didn't cry, but when he pressed his face into my palm, I could feel my resolve weakening. The woman stepped forward and gently offered, "If you're not sure, you don't have to." But I nodded slowly, knowing I had to make that choice. It wasn't a lack of love that drove my decision. It was the depth of it. Some stories find their conclusions far from their beginnings, and Mara understood that without needing to explain anything. She had walked away quietly, leaving me to understand in my own way. Now it was my turn to embrace her choice, even if it felt as though it broke something undefinable inside me. As I turned to leave, I didn't look back. It wasn't that I wanted to avoid it, rather it felt like a choice I had to make, not to change my mind in that moment. Outside, the wind tugged gently at my coat. I found myself imagining Mara, somewhere above, watching silently. There was no anger in her gaze, just a stillness, as if she were observing everything with quiet understanding. I often reflect on my choice. I don't know if it was the right one, but in truth, I believe there may not have been a definitive answer. I carry the decision with me now, the weight of it, the moments of wonder I ponder, and the grief intertwined in both. Sometimes I swear I can hear the sound of little paws tapping across the floor, or feel the warm press of a memory nestled deep within me. It doesn't hurt less, but the pain feels clearer now. Through the journey of rescue and parting, I've learned an important lesson. Not all bonds are meant to last a lifetime. Some are meant to be honored, even as they slip away. And perhaps, somewhere out there, Mara knows this truth too. Some endings leave us pondering more than they resolve. They resonate within us, bringing a mix of emotions and questions. Life often teaches us that true rescue doesn't always mean fixing a situation or holding on tightly. Sometimes it's about simply being there for someone, offering love unconditionally, and having the courage to let go, even when it's painful. Have you ever felt the heaviness of an unspoken farewell, or faced a decision that felt less about right or wrong and more about what needed to happen? If this resonates with you, I invite you to share your thoughts. Every story, no matter how quiet, holds value and deserves to be acknowledged. If you find this perspective meaningful, think about joining us as we continue to explore the many layers of life. There are still more stories, voices, and those subtle moments that need our attention. As we move forward, remember to honor the unresolved aspects of life, embrace the love that doesn't stick around, and pay close attention. Sometimes the most powerful narratives unfold in silence.